Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Holmes Hindley Royal Building Committee meeting of October the 6th, 2022, starting at 6:04 p.m. I'm Chris Price, Chairman of the Building Committee. The first order of business is to approve the meeting minutes from the meeting of September the 14th. Those were circulated along with the agenda. Could I get a motion to approve those minutes? Jill moves. Frank seconds. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great, unanimous. Any public comment from folks that may be in attendance here that are not ex officio or direct members of the committee? No? Okay. In terms of the chair's report, I'm going to keep it pretty brief because most of what I had to report is going to be things that we're going to talk about in more detail this evening. As everybody knows, there's been a tremendous amount of work that's been done in the conceptual design phase, now the schematic design phase, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering aspects of it. The design team has been super busy. You know, obviously kudos to KG&D, the O&G AP team, Ty and Bond, Marilli Gallagher. You guys have all been just crushing it. But I do want to, just while we're recording and while this is public record, I feel like it's appropriate and necessary to call out the amount of work that Jill has put in, and to thank her for what she's done. She has been carrying just an enormous load, certainly, I mean, throughout the whole process since this committee was stood up, but really in particular since she agreed to chair the design subcommittee. As folks know, Jill is a very active member of the Board of Education. And so in that role, in addition to getting deeply engaged in the design aspects of this project, has been acting as the primary interface with the Board of Education and the school district and Dr. Adley and his whole team. So I think I just think it's appropriate and necessary to call out Jill and to thank her and to tell her how much I personally appreciate all the work that she's been doing to this point, and I'm sure is going to continue to do.
Thank you.
Well done, Joe.
Team effort. Thank you. Appreciate those words.
So with that, I was going to turn it over to the KG&D team, who's going to walk us through the schematic design. Really, the schedule for this evening is to talk about the schematic designs, both the design, the civil engineering aspects of it, the MEP engineering aspects of it, and where we stand on the cost estimates. In parallel with the design part of it, the KG&D had its estimator, NASCO Construction Services, and Dave Crevenzola had the O&G AP cost estimators do the cost estimating work based off of the conceptual designs and the schematics at the point that they're at, so we can see where we are against our budget, and we can talk about some of the alternatives. And we're going to talk specifically about two items that we're going to propose adding to the scope of the design. That would be the Curtis property and the upgrading of the roofs on the three schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, unless people have any questions before we start. With that, I would turn it over to Eric and Lauren and Travis.
Thank you, Chris, and Jill and everybody else on the HHR BC committee. Great to see everybody tonight. This is sort of the culmination of about 4 months of work that we've done collaboratively. We've been meeting on a regular basis, and both internal with the consulting team as well as external with all of you, and it's been a terrific process to date. And I think that this presentation will show, and that we're sharing tonight will show the amount of work that was put together by the entire team, and we're in a good position to proceed forward. And I guess the result of this meeting this evening is hopefully to get approval from you all to proceed forward with the next phase of work, which is the design development. But this schematic design is approximately 30% or a third of the work in terms of putting together a set of construction drawings. And so there's a lot of work that's been done, but there's still a lot of work to be done. The renderings that you see in front on the cover sheet here are Hindley on the left, Holmes in the middle, and Royal on the right. And you'll see over the course of this presentation a series of renderings so that everybody has a pretty good flavor for what this project will look like at the end. Travis, next. So this presentation will include the project goals. We'll get into the cost estimates right at the beginning so that everybody is put at ease as to where we are in terms of the financial aspects, implications of this project. We're going to go through Hindley, then Holmes, and Royal. Then I'll turn it over to our site and landscape design team, and they can speak about those aspects, and then the engineering related to the mechanical and electrical can follow them. And then finally, we will discuss a little bit what the next steps in terms of the approvals are for the next couple of months. So we want to show this slide, and this is a slide that we prepared very early on in the process, but it really relates back to what are our goals, what are the core recommendations and the design guidelines that we're needing to live by throughout this, and ultimately this project will be successful as long as we meet all of these recommendations and guidelines. And they include eliminating the temporary portable classrooms, renovating or constructing new global learning commons, correctly sizing the general and special subject classrooms. We're going to be upgrading the mechanical systems, envelope, and site. And in terms of guidelines, we want to make sure that when we're done with this project, we really have created inspirational places of learning, that we've integrated the Board of Ed's ed specs throughout, and you'll see that in this presentation. There's program consistency across the 3 buildings on campus and their campuses. So we want to make sure that those ed specs that relate to Hindley also relate to Holmes and to Royal as well. Satisfy the current goals and plan flexibility for the future. We want to make sure that when this project is done, that in 10 or 20 years from now, it still can be utilized in a wonderful way, and that you can utilize some of the spaces that you currently have in other ways. Provide a variety of learning environments and community access. Obviously, these are buildings that are used by the students during the day, but in the evenings and weekends, they could be used by the community. We want to make sure that there's access to the building by others. And then ultimately, we want to incorporate sustainable design solutions throughout, whether that's the building systems as well as the materials and other aspects of the building and site development. Travis? Just very briefly, when we were looking at this to begin with, the enrollment projection showed that ultimately between now and 2030, that we're going to need 24 classrooms at Hindley, 24 classrooms at Holmes, and 22 general classrooms at Royal. And so that was part of the ed specs, and that was the expectation as we were developing these 3 projects. Next. So we created program spreadsheets for all 3 buildings, and this is just a very small section just to show people kind of what we were looking at. And what we did is every single space in the building, educational and office space in the building, was listed, how large it was, where it's located in the building, how the square footage existing as well as what the planned square footage is when it's done. So that obviously, again, and then making sure in each case that we're meeting those educational specifications. And it also lists some of the modifications that are planned in each of those rooms. So in some cases, for example, if you look on the right here, it says NC, which is no change, other than the fact that we're planning on putting new ceilings and lighting in those classrooms. Travis. By the way, please, if you have a question, if I'm going too fast, you want to review something, just raise your hand or just interrupt me. I'm perfectly happy stopping and fielding questions along the way. This is the evaluation process. We reviewed the core recommendations and ed specs, and these were based on what was previously done at Ox Ridge. Over time, we have reviewed reports which included traffic, hazardous materials, and had additional surveying done. We've analyzed the existing classroom for size, quantity, and locations. And that's not just the general classrooms, but it's also the resource rooms and the other shared spaces in the building. We've identified areas for new construction. We tested ideas with design. So what that means is that we had multiple ways of looking at each of these projects and ultimately came up with kind of a good, better, best solution and proceeded forward based on the recommendations of this committee as we went. We reviewed phasing and constructability, and that is going to be an ongoing process. I know that during design development, we're probably going to spend a lot more time reviewing the phasing of these and working with ONG AP to really understand over the course of the project, since these schools will be in operation the entire time, is how we're going to do construction in a safe manner while school's in session. We did building inspections of the systems throughout. We looked at the cost for each aspect, and we made recommendations to the committee for best design approaches in each of these 3 projects. Next. So this discussion I'm going to share with Dave Cravenzola, but I guess I'll just tee it up, which is at each phase, both ONG AP as well as the KG&D's professional cost estimator, NASCO, independently looked at the documents that we put together and prepared cost estimates. These were done in 2 separate places, and when they were done, we got together, we reviewed the numbers, we reviewed the cost estimates, reconciled, found areas where there were potential significant differences between the 2, talked about why there were differences, and decided whether or not we needed to make some adjustments to those numbers, and they went back, did some cleaning up the estimates, and came back together. But I will say that even before that, the estimates were quite close together. And with that, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Dave and get his approach on this. And then I'll go through what this slide says.
Sure. Thanks, Eric, for teeing that up. As I believe was shared with you, we provided our estimates, and hopefully there was a little bit of consistency in the way the information was presented on those estimates relative to those conceptual estimates that we had been reviewing a few months ago when we were looking at preparing for the grant application. So that's the format that the estimates will follow as we continue on through the process. In a nutshell, as Eric said, we're in a good spot here at the end of schematic design. I think that with the efforts put forth in the design and trying to include the facets of work that were required, just kind of put some other numbers on it, is that if you look at all 3 projects collectively, we're about 3.25% under budget Individually, Hindley is about 7.9%. And what we did with that, Eric, I think a little further on the presentation has it, but took a combined average of our estimate and NASCO's estimate just to get a better blend of that and compared that to the budgets. Thank you, Travis. So that, as you look at the 1.821, that's about 7.96% under budget. The 1.36 over is about 6.55% over, and the Royal at 1785 is about 7.25% under. So the blend of that is about 3.3% under budget, which really at this point in the project is a good spot to be, especially given some of the the fact that we do have escalation and things like that included in it. So at a high level, things are very good. I mean, there's a lot of information that's in those estimates, but to Eric's point, we spent a lot of time going through them together. Our estimators spent time talking about those estimates, what was contained in them. I can certainly answer any questions that you have of detail related to those estimates if they come up either tonight or afterward. But short of that, I'd say we could bounce back to that previous slide and talk about, I think some of the items that are not in those estimates that are going to be topics of discussion.
Just one question initially. This is all based on current pricing, or is there any sort of escalation cost built in for not only the fact that we're not bidding the project out today? So even if we were to hold the contractors to their prices, we're not going to contractors yet. So with price increases being what they are regularly for raw material and equipment, what goes into these numbers in terms of the pricing? Today's numbers or in anticipation of the future?
Yep. So that's a good question, Frank. So how it works is when we put our estimates together, all of the background pricing information as we're pricing the trade work, we're pricing it in today's dollars. And we're using what we're seeing coming in as we're bidding work. But then what we're also doing is we're forecasting escalation on top of that. And how we do it at ONGAP is, our estimators are constantly in communication about what are we seeing for escalation. So what we included here was 8% annual escalation. And then what we do is we extrapolate that out to the bid date, because essentially on bid day is when we're locking in all those trade contractor numbers. So in the instance of this estimate, we had 8% per year, but then we had 10 months essentially of escalation, so that it came out to 6.67% of escalation that was put on essentially all of the trade costs across the board.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yep.
So in terms of, go ahead.
Dave, you might want to also talk about contingency there, because there's lines of contingency, both owner and construction.
Yep. So yeah. So if as you look at the summary sheet of our estimates, there are 3 contingency line items. The first one is we call it the design contingency, right? So the documents are at a schematic design level. So as the design moves to design development and then construction documents, we know there were things that we presumed or didn't presume that will, with more detail being added, that there's some factor of that we put on it. So for I think we may have had a slightly different value, Eric. I think between us and NASCO, I know we ended up carrying 8% for a schematic design contingency. And then, when we go to design development, that'll likely go down to probably 4.5% or 5.5%. And then we just talked about escalation. And then the last one is the GMP contingency that is in our contract. It's just I believe it's in the contract, and it's essentially for the items of scope that throughout the bidding process we do not buy a portion of the work, and it's there to account for work that was not assigned or bought during the bidding and award process.
So just to summarize, given what we know, the good news is that this bid basically brings us in on budget with a 3% wiggle room, but it already includes the dollars that we have allocated for escalation and both types of contingency, correct?
Correct. And it's based upon what we see for escalation as of today, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes, so the 6
I
point
know
something.
and again, Frank, you've probably seen this. I mean, some things have been outpacing other portions of the work too. Some of the MEP materials they're still on the rise. So
Yeah,
we're
and that'll,
trying.
I'm thinking it'll slow down, but we won't
I hope
know.
so.
It's hard to predict the
Yeah,
future, and it's
yeah. And again, we're going to revisit it when we do the next estimate, and maybe at that point we say, well, yes, we're closer to the bid date, but we're looking at, the better case is what we're looking at an annual escalation of only 6%, but maybe we're looking at an annual escalation now of 10%, and we're gonna do as best as we can to forecast that, account for that in the estimate, so that we're not sitting here surprised on bid day.
and this is all the labor is all prevailing wage. Whether it's Southern
It's
Connecticut, Fairfield County, or the state prevailing wage.
it's all prevailing wage. It's not required to be union. It's simply prevailing wage because we're using public funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess I'll jump back in and talk slightly longer about this slide. So the base bid work, Hindley, and these numbers are based on the O&G AP number, which was their estimate was a little bit higher than the NASCO number. That Hindley was more than $1 million under budget. Holmes was approximately $1.5 million over budget, and Royal was a little more than $500,000 under budget. So the base bid portion of the overall scope of work for all three of these schools is on budget. And so what is base bid? Well, at Hindley, base bid also includes the curb cut to Post Road. It includes the stormwater also on Hindley's campus, which were aspects of the project that were added right at the beginning of this process. At Holmes, what's not included in the base bid is the work associated with Curtis property, and that's this next portion of the slide, which says that the total cost for the Holmes project is approximately $1 million. The two estimates are a little bit different, but that's approximately where we feel that we would be if we do the improvements associated with Curtis. And what are those improvements? Basically, there's a new parking lot that's in there, which would accommodate something in the range of 14 to 16 cars. There's a service access road that would be utilized as the construction access during the construction process, so that the construction vehicles didn't have to cross over where the kids are playing. So this is a pretty important aspect of health and safety during the construction schedule, but it also would double when this project is done as as the service road for garbage pickup, and anytime there was an emergency, it would give us another access point to the backside of the campus. There's also
before you move, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric, keep going.
There's also stormwater associated with this project because we are providing new additions, and so we have to contain water on campus associated with those impervious surfaces. And so we're proposing to do that stormwater in we call it the Curtis property. A lot of that property is actually, most of the property is owned by the town and it's woods, but there is a portion in the front section adjacent to the parking lot, which is called the Curtis property. So it's a combination of those two. Go ahead, Chris.
If I could, let me just stop there for a second on Curtis, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Curtis in detail as another agenda item. But at this point, I don't want people to get too locked in on that $1 million number. As folks can appreciate, one of the things we're going to need to do is, if this committee, there's a series of steps, right? It'll be up to this committee to discuss and take action on whether or not we add these items that relate to the Curtis property to the scope of the design that Eric and his team, and in particular the civil engineers, are working with. If that's approved, there's a series of other steps, because at the end of the day, this is owned by the town, and the Board of Education has to make a request to the town to transfer custody and control of the Curtis property from the town to the Board of Education. And because there's going to be a series of items of work to be done on Curtis, there's going to need to be a request for an appropriation to do that work, because it was not, as folks recall from back in the spring, when we were first presenting our appropriation request, we were saying that Curtis was to be studied. We'll talk in a few, a little bit later this evening about the extent of that study and what was done. We sort of are at that point now, and it's the point of recommending that it be added to the scope. But the amount to do the work wasn't part of the appropriation that we requested in the spring. As Eric pointed out, there's two separate estimates. There's a fairly significant delta between NASCO's estimate and ONGAP's estimate as it relates to Curtis. And I think we need to spend a little bit more time on reconciling those before we can come up with an amount that we're going to ask as an appropriation. So again, it may be that $1 million number, but I don't want people to get too locked into that just yet. Jill, you were going to say?
Nope.
No?
Okay. So then there are two other elements that weren't part of the original base bid work, but were, as we developed the schematic designs, items that we wanted to make sure that were at least discussed, so that you could determine whether or not you want to include them as part of this project. The first is roof work. At all three schools, there are existing roofs that were replaced in 2006 last, so they're getting close to 20 years old. Those roofs are are going to be worked on because we're putting new mechanical systems on the roofs. You also have proposals for photovoltaics on those roofs. Before you do that work, you really should be looking at potentially the replacement of those roofs so that they're in good condition at the start of when you're putting in that new equipment on the roofs. That work listed here is approximately $4 million worth of work for those three different roofs.
And I would jump in if I could one more time, and that just is, that's an estimate, that's a fairly rough cut number. And if the committee agrees to add the roof work, and we'll talk about it a little bit later this evening, to add the roof work to the scope of the design, we'll need to drill down with more detail so that we can come up with what we think a more precise number is for purposes of making a request for an appropriation for the roof work.
Thanks, Chris. And then finally, there were some miscellaneous items. ONGAP felt it was important to point out that when we're finished with these projects, the base bid work, you still have some paving on campus, the existing parking lots, existing roadways, existing sidewalks, which weren't part of the base bid. And when you're done with doing all these other improvements, they may look not to the same caliber or quality as the rest of the work on campus when they're done, and you may want to do additional repaving or concrete curb work as part of this at the end of this project. So that would be something that we should continue to talk about, probably continue to carry, and then if there's money available at the end of this project, maybe that's where you would want to release additional funds to do some of that work. Also in there's a couple of items. Cafeteria ceilings and lighting weren't part of the base bid, but as we're doing ceilings and lighting elsewhere, it might be a good time to look at the acoustics and ceilings and lighting in those three cafeterias at Hindley Homes and Royal. Travis?
Before you jump, Eric, just to remind the committee of how alternates might work, right? That this basically what we would do is it's not inside of our original scope. We're not planning necessarily to take it on. What we would do is go ahead and bid for it. And if the bids come in and there is room to do these projects, then we could. We also will be talking about roofs and Curtis. So there's a whole process of deciding, but Eric and the team are identifying what are possible alternates as we move through this process. There is nothing, we're not making any decisions necessarily about those alternates this evening.
Just one question, understanding we're not, thanks for explaining that, by the way. Understanding we're not making a decision. Roofs are pretty important, so understandably it's a recommendation to consider it, but that's pretty vague. You would recommend we consider it. Do you really think we need it? I mean, you understand the scope. I don't, obviously,
The
as the
roof is a
mechanical
bit
guy
different,
here.
Frank.
I'm
Frank, the
sorry?
roof's a bit, I'm going to jump in, sorry. The roof is a bit different. We will talk about it in more detail. That is roof work that was already planned that the Board of Ed was planning to take on. But it's the timeline for the Board of Ed project was meant to be earlier. We're actually finding that our project is impacting the Board of Ed and the timelines are going to now run in parallel. So the ask is, will this committee take on the work? And we'll talk about that more in detail. It is highly probable that we'll take that on, but we need to discuss it as a committee first.
That's okay, but you think we need it because of this work? It sounds like then the answer is it was going to be done anyway. It's not a result of this work.
Well, yes and no, because where we are putting mechanicals is impacting how the Board of Ed was planning to do its roof project. So if it's okay, Frank, these are good questions. Let's table it and we get to that full agenda item. Let's go through that roof item in detail because the questions you're asking are important and we need to walk through the timeline and what exactly it means. This is just so you can see the financial side of it, but we need to walk through the actual scope of work as a committee.
Okay.
Travis, next slide. So now we're going to go into the three projects and what's involved with the three projects. This is an aerial of Hindley. You can see in the top right corner, that's the north side of Hindley today. You can see the modular buildings, classrooms that are there, and the generators in green. So what we're proposing is to eliminate the modular classrooms, and we're putting a one-story addition, which includes the learning commons, the world language, and the art and music classrooms. And it's also creating a courtyard in the middle, which will be an educational space for outdoor learning. Well, right here, if we stop for just 1 second, you can also have a pretty good view of this roof. You can see where the photovoltaics are planned, and you can also see where mechanical equipment is planned. So some of that mechanical equipment is existing, but the majority of it's replacement and new mechanical equipment, and some of it is screened accordingly. Next. So in gray is the existing building, and in blue is the proposed new addition. It's approximately a little over 11,000 square feet. If you start on the left side, you'll see that there's a connection to Boston Post Road. That's a new curb cut, and that would be the access point for parents who are coming to pick up their children. And then at the bottom of the page, you can see Nearwater Lane, and we have extended the bus loop basically to where the existing entrance is at the nearest point of the intersection, so that we can have more buses queuing on campus, and likewise for the parents, more parents queuing on campus, because today there's an awful lot of parents that actually park directly on Boston Post Road and their kids walk out, and that creates congestion on Boston Post Road and is not as safe for the children. I think we'll wait till the civil drawings to talk about stormwater, but on the north side of the campus here, just to the north of the blue addition there, we're proposing to replace the underground storm piping, which picks up all the water from the building roofs as well as the parking lots, pipes it underground, and pipes it to the right edge of the property, which is the east end of the property. And you can see a dark green oval there, and that would be an open rain garden, exposed detention basin, which water would collect there. We would hold it on campus for a period of time, and then it would be released back into the pipe system so that the households that are to the east of us here, who currently have some issues with stormwater at times when there's heavy rains, that we can remediate that issue. Next slide. Just for color coding here, in gray is existing building, which has either no or minor modifications. In purple are spaces or classrooms and rooms that have more major modifications, which includes shifting walls and that sort of thing. And then in blue is the new construction. You can see in red here, the kindergarten house on the left is where the existing kindergarten is. At the top of the page, you can see the Learning Commons on the left in blue, World Language in the middle, and then the 3 classrooms to the right there are for the art and music. And then on this first floor, we were locating the 1st and 2nd grade classrooms, and they also have resource rooms. So in each of these, based on the ed specs, we're providing not only the specialized resource rooms like OTPT and speech, we're also providing resource rooms that are dedicated for use by the adjacent to the classrooms, and in each building we're providing 6 resource rooms, which for the most part do not exist today.
Just
Next
a
slide.
question on the gray. Did I understand you? The gray are getting little to no modification?
They still have there's mechanical and electrical work in each of these rooms.
That was the
But
question. Okay.
and several of these rooms are also getting ceilings and lighting.
Okay.
But the rooms are not being reconfigured. I guess that's the real difference.
Understood. The question was on they're still getting mechanical, even though they're gray.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Next slide. Travis. So the 2nd floor is dedicated for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. We have the general classrooms as well as resource rooms to accommodate those needs. And you can see there's no new construction here. This is all either light or heavy renovation. Next. Here's a few renderings that our office produced. The large one is from the north looking south and looking back at the art, music, and world language classrooms. That's a new playground. And then at this, well, you can also see in the middle on the right there, that's the courtyard. And so that's looking from the art and music wing corridor, looking into that courtyard. And that will be an educational space. It will not have grass, but it will have a landscape and greenscape in there. And Travis, do you have the video that you want to show right now? It's a quick walkthrough of the Hindley campus from the outside only.
Yeah, we can play that. Should work. We'll see if it lags.
Well, if it works here, then we can use it for all 3.
Yep.
Well,
how's that showing?
If it was in our office, it would be smoother, but it's moving. So again, you can see the photovoltaics and the rooftop units. So one of the aspects of this project is the elimination of the existing library. And so the existing library will be gone, and this is what will be seen in its place. It will be a second means of entrance and egress for the students at the beginning of the end of the day, and it creates a nice outdoor plaza. You can see tables at the bottom of the page there, that's right outside the cafeteria. That will be a new area for kids to have outdoor eating when it's nice out. This rendering actually shows green on the roof, which would be a vegetative roof. It's an alternate. If there's funding available, that's one place. We only typically do that when you have classrooms that look down onto a roof. And since you have second floor classrooms here, that would be an opportunity to potentially show off a vegetative roof. Vegetative roofs reduce heat gain and lengthen the life of a roof. And again, here's a view from the north side looking back at the new classroom addition. Thanks, Travis. Go to the next. Go to homes.
Eric, do you want to take any questions for Henley before you move on?
Absolutely. Any questions? With no questions, I will continue. So this is an aerial view of homes. We are proposing 2 additions here, and the first addition is right as you enter the campus. That on the right side, the right end of that, you see a new addition, and that's for 2 music classrooms as well as music storage. And there's a new corridor that's in front of the cafeteria and a new main entrance vestibule. Today, your entrance vestibule and security point is within the lobby space. It's a glass enclosure. We're proposing to build a dedicated vestibule. You'll be able to eliminate that glass enclosure and open up that lobby space, and then have a secure point which is right at your front door. Also on the right side here is, we talked earlier briefly about what was known as the Curtis property. You can see a parking lot right there with a blue car. That's the proposed new parking lot. We need to relocate the generator that's currently in the footprint of where the music building is. And you can see the road just to the right of the music building, and that's that new service road that we're proposing that connects to the back and would connect to allow garbage trucks to get back to the dumpsters and pick up garbage. Today, they go across the parking lot to pick those up. Next slide. So here is the site plan. In blue are the new additions. There's 3 of them. I just mentioned the new main entrance. You can see the blue corridor leading to the front door, which is the red triangle right there, and then the 2 music classrooms to the right edge. On the rear of the building, there's a 2-story classroom addition. And in the middle, in the courtyard there's a small addition, and that's for the learning commons, to extend the learning commons out towards the courtyard and create some additional space inside, because the home's library today is undersized. Next slide. So on left is the first floor. Again, gray is work that where we're not reconfiguring rooms, but we're still doing mechanical work. In most of those rooms, there's ceiling and lighting work being done as well. And purple in the middle, the large purple area, is that learning commons. Directly above that, you can see in blue is that expansion of the learning commons into the courtyard. At the top of the page is the first floor of the first.
Eric, because there's a couple blues, will you point out the learning commons just when it's easy if you use your cursor just so we can follow you.
Okay, Travis needs to do that. Thanks, Travis.
Yeah, learning commons is right over here. And Eric, I should jump in there. The gray is really only mechanical MEP work. It's no major architectural work, including ceilings and finishes. Just correct you on that.
It depends on the space. The cafeteria, for example, has ceilings and lighting. Okay. So the way that this floor plan is laid out, on the left side is the kindergarten. It's where the current kindergarten house is. First and second grade is the wing in the middle. So it'll be the 2 grades, and we are able to fit all classrooms as well as resource rooms by creating this two-story addition. And then to the right are those two music rooms, as well as the music instrument storage space in between. To the right, that floor plan is the second floor plan. Second floor plan at the top right is the 4th and 5th grade house, similar to the 1st and 2nd grade. It has 8 classrooms, 4 for the 4th grade, 4 for the 5th grade, as well as resource space. And so that's a dedicated wing. Nobody else needs to go down that hallway. It's strictly for the 4th and 5th graders. The 3rd graders are currently on the left wing there, and they will continue to be housed in that area. On this floor is also where the world language and art departments are. Next. So here's some quick renderings. This the large rendering is from the parking lot looking at the proposed new entrance. What you're seeing, the largest volume there is one of the music classrooms. There's an entrance just to the left of that, which would be a service access, and will be access to the building, but also a service directly to the kitchen. And then the series of windows to the left there is the corridor that leads back to the main entrance and front lobby. And with that, I think, Travis, probably best to show the video again. So here we're going down and looking at that front entrance. Front entrance to the left, the music room to the right. You can see the service entrance right there on the right end of the screen. Wraps around. Now you can see that service driveway, which would lead to the back. And this is the Kerrs property with the parking on the right side. You can see the generator straight ahead, and that's being screened. There is a retaining wall, which is what you're seeing just on the right side there, which steps down to where the stormwater detention basins are. Right in front, this is the new two-story classroom addition. You can see those bay windows. There's one classroom in each one of those bays. And now you're looking into the courtyard. If you can pause that for a second, Travis. Thanks. So today, the asphalt that you see here in the foreground extends all the way into the courtyard, wall to wall. There's no greenery in there whatsoever. And the proposal here is to create a garden space that's an educational space during the day. It can also be an activity space, and it's directly off of where the Learning Commons library is. And so from that Learning Commons, you'll be able to look straight out to that outdoor area. And when you get to the landscape plans, you'll see that there's even kind of a mini stage or platform so that you can have presentations and performances happening out there. Okay, continue, Travis. And that's true on all three campuses, that we're doing something similar to this. So on the left there is the 1st and 2nd grade on the 1st floor, and the 4th and 5th grade on the 2nd floor. And now you're looking into where the Learning Commons is straight ahead on the right. Thanks, Travis. Next slide. Go to Royal. So it's an aerial view of Royal.
I want to see if there's any Holmes questions. Sorry, Eric.
Perfectly fine. Any questions? Thanks. So again, we're looking down at the roof. So Royal, unlike, and I probably should have said, Hindley and Holmes had a section of roof replaced already, and that was done in the last couple of years. So if anybody asked you, I thought there was work done on Hindley and Holmes roofs? Yes, there were small sections of both of those roofs that were done. On Royal, none of the roofs have been replaced at this point. So where we're seeing the white boxes up there, those are proposed as photovoltaic panels, and you can see the new rooftop units that are housed up there as well. And so with a roof that's 16 to 18 years old. That's one of the things that definitely needs to be considered. What you can see here, and I just mentioned the outdoor learning spaces. What you see in the oval there is kind of a newly created courtyard. Today, in that space is where the existing library is. So we're proposing to demolish the library. We're building a new classroom addition, and that's what you're seeing on the right there, Travis, if you can circle that. That's a two-story addition. It's first graders on the first floor and second graders on the second floor. And then the library is being replaced, and it will be central, similar to homes. It'll be centered in that courtyard. And Travis, if you can circle that portion, that one-story area there, that we're renovating and repurposing the first floor in the original wing for the use as the Learning Commons library. And it's being extended out similar to homes into the courtyard and activating that space. You will also see in the back corner, Travis, if you can bubble the art and music wing, that is the footprint of where the existing first grade wing is. That building is, as well as the 3 modulars that are back there, are proposed to be demolished. And in their place is where we're going to be relocating the music and art departments. And at the bottom of the picture here, you can actually see the photograph of the existing, and you can see the library, the one-story library, right in the middle of the screen, and that's the portion that's planned to be demolished. And you can see on the right, that's the one-story first grade wing, which is also planned to be demolished, and the new building basically built on the same footprint. Next slide. So this is the site plan. It shows 3 additions as well. The small box in the middle is the Learning Commons. The large box to the right of that is the new 2-story addition for the first and second grade. And the addition on the right is the 1-story addition for the art and music.
Eric, will you please show where the library was? Or Travis?
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
library,
right in here.
the library is where we're proposing to have a courtyard today. It's relatively level. One of the biggest issues with that library is its proximity to the 1990s wing. Travis, can you circle the 1990s wing on the left? Yes, that area. The library, when the 1990s wing was built, the library was within 6 feet. The exterior elevations within 6 feet of the new building that was built back in 1996. Next slide. So the left side, the first floor on the left is where the main entrance is. Just below, when you walk in the front door, just below that is the kindergarten wing. The long purple section right in the middle of that plan is all planned to be part of the Learning Commons, is all part of that library, and the blue section extends out into that courtyard. Once again, the first grade is the blue box to the right there. It has 4 classrooms and it has 2 resource spaces in there, as well as some toilets. And to the right there, to the right of where the existing gym and commons is the art and music suite. And there's an art room and 2 music rooms, as well as music storage. The second floor is the plan to the right. You can see in purple is where we're doing some major renovation to create right-sized classrooms, which was part of the ed specifications that tried to get plus or minus 800 square foot classrooms in all cases. And to the right and below that is where the second graders are. And similar to the first graders, there's 4 classrooms as well as 2 resource rooms. The 4th and 5th graders will be where the current 4th and 5th graders are, which is in the 1996 wing on the left. Yes, thanks. Next slide. So here's some renderings of them. To the top left is looking into that courtyard, and you can see that presentation active space in the middle. Directly below that is that same view, but just down at eye level. To the right on the top is looking at the on the left side there is the first and second grade addition, and then straight ahead on the right is the music and art suite. And down below is just the end elevation of that art building, music building. I should say that in all cases, when you're looking at exterior materials, that we're looking to match the materials. The red brick of the existing building was planned to be matched. There's cast stone detailing. There's double white painted double hung windows. We're doing a similar detailing and design to assimilate the proposed additions to the existing, while not necessarily exactly matching. So now we're going into this courtyard again. This is where the original library was. You're looking straight ahead. That's where the proposed library is. On the right side there is the first and second grade addition. You're currently on the playing field. See the stairway there. If you look through the window, now we're on the side there. Right in the middle is where the existing commons is, with the classroom building on the left, the art and music on the right. This is the garden that's currently there. And then there's an end elevation of, that's the art room at the end there, and that art room is facing north. We always try to have art rooms facing north at all possible because it brings in a tremendous amount of natural light that's diffused so that you don't have a whole lot of glare. And that's it from above. And I will stop any questions related to Royal. If not,
Eric, this is Eric. This is Dave Martin. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, I was just curious. I can't see the designs, but I know you mentioned specifically at Homes, we're going to get a new security vestibule. Are we in considering or encompassing anything like that for Royal as well?
So Royal already has a vestibule. It has a lobby space in all three lobbies. We're providing a welcome desk, and there will be a security point as in terms of the vestibule, that before you go from the vestibule into the lobby, you'll have to be able to share identification. As long as you're acceptable to come into the building, then you'd be allowed in. But instead of having in some cases, there'll be a main office with a transaction window. In our cases, for all three of these schools, we're proposing to maintain a similar look and feel to what we have today, which is a very safe way of doing it, but actually having a welcome desk that acts as a very important feature in each one of these three schools.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Travis, can you give me the next slide, and then I'll pass it over to Joe and Sean. So I just wanted to go through the general site guidelines, and then I'll have Joe and Sean go through the actual plans. But the guidelines include targeting 95 parking spaces on each campus. Currently on the three campuses, somewhere between 75 and 82 parking spaces. Want to mitigate on and off site stormwater runoff. We discussed that a little bit at Hindley, but on all three of these campuses, you see that we have to address stormwater based on the new additions and impervious surfaces that we're creating. At Hindley, there's the curb cut, which will create a more efficient vehicle circulation for parents, get them off of the post road, get them on campus. We'll be able to queue all those cars on campus, which will be a significant improvement, as well as when we increase the bus loop, we'll be able to get buses off of Nearwater Lane and more on campus. So both of those aspects are really critical to how the circulation, vehicular circulation happens on campus. Courtyard design guidelines. similar to the building design, we want to make sure that these are inspirational places of learning. We want to integrate the ed specs in all of our spaces, not just the inside spaces, but also the outside spaces. We want them to be consistent between the three buildings. We want to satisfy the current goals and, again, plan flexibility in the future so that these new courtyards will have many different uses. They'll be able to be used educationally, socially, as well as for some amount of play outside. Community access. Having these accessible to community is important to all of us. 2 out of the 3 of these courtyards are 3-sided, so the 4 sides open, have direct access into them, so when they're not being used by the school, they can be used by the community. We're looking at sustainable solutions throughout the building as well as on site. You'll see that the landscape material that will be selected will be indigenous and require low water use, as well as when they're in courtyards, we're going to minimize and eliminate grass, for example, and minimize the maintenance required inside of those courtyards. As I said, they'll be used for both play and teaching. They create a sense of scale. And we will also be looking at opportunities to provide shading and reducing the amount of pavement on campus. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe and Sean. Joe?
Okay, great. So we're looking here at the Hindley Elementary School, the site plan for Hindley. And as Eric discussed before, one of the major components here is the new proposed curb cut to Post Road, which you see over there, which Travis has circled. In order to reinforce that as a right turn out, right turn in only driveway, we will need to construct a median in Post Road. And that would also entail removing the existing crosswalk that's there now. So the pedestrian crossing would be moved to the corner of Nearwater in Hindley, which is down towards the bottom right there, Travis. And as part of that, we're planning on constructing a new sidewalk to facilitate that pedestrian movement from the intersection into the school campus. We're proposing a crosswalk across the driveway. What we'd like to see there is a contrasting color to give it more visibility. We did evaluate the potential of using an elevated crosswalk, something that is raised, so it forces vehicles to slow down. But unfortunately, because of drainage, the fact that the crosswalk is on a skew makes the drainage very difficult, as well as it makes it more difficult to traverse for emergency vehicles. So the other piece of that is we do have we're closing an existing curb cut on Nearwater. That is being closed to lengthen the bus loop. And then working our way around, we also are relocating the trash enclosure. It's in the same general area, but it's being shifted to accommodate some of the circulation needs. And as we work our way counterclockwise around the building, you can see there is our stormwater detention system, which is on the property line. That what we're looking to do is maybe some sort of rain garden type of arrangement to attenuate peak flow and runoff from the site. So within that we're not increasing the amount of flow that's leaving the site. We also there's an existing storm drain that runs across the site through our new addition. So we do need to relocate that. One of the nice things about this is a lot of the addition is being built on top of existing impervious cover. So that does help minimize the amount of stormwater management we need to do here. We are also rotating the bituminous concrete, the paved play area that's behind the existing school. We're rotating that 90 degrees to provide a similar size surface for play. And that is just right around where Travis's cursor is. Another element that we're doing is, as Eric discussed, is for the outdoor eating area, which is will be put in the place of where that existing garden is. So the eating areas down there, and the garden will be relocated to the opposite side of the building, as it was shown in Eric's schematic drawings. So all that is included in the base bid. What is not included, we did not include repaving any of the existing parking lot or redoing any of the existing sidewalks unless it was something that was right in a specific area of work. For example, with extending the bus loop, we did have to redo a portion of the existing sidewalk, replace it. So that is what we're proposing for Henley.
So, Joe, can you talk a minute about the drainage again? So what does that solve for?
Okay, yeah. So the drainage, because we have a new addition, right? There is a slight increase in impervious surface on this site, and as impervious cover goes up, the amount of runoff leaving the site also increases. So we need to way to bring that back down to existing levels. And so what we're doing is creating a stormwater detention basin there on the south property line. And what that does, that'll retain some of the stormwater. So what it does, it effectively meters it out over time so that you're not increasing the rate of runoff from the site. And it also provides an opportunity to infiltrate some of the stormwater, which we don't have on the site now. So that'll also help reduce volume that's discharged from the site. So it serves two purposes.
Can you explain that infiltrate one, please?
Okay, sure. So if you can imagine a site when it rains, you get runoff coming off the parking lot, and that total amount, there's a certain volume of rainfall runoff that comes off the site. By introducing more impervious surface, we are not allowing the rainfall to soak into the ground. So we have to somehow replicate that process. And that's what this detention basin does. It provides an area where runoff can collect, and it allows it the opportunity to infiltrate, so basically be absorbed into the ground. So that instead of running off the site into the properties to the south, we're actually recharging the groundwater.
So thank you. While we're on Henley, there are certain thresholds that when we hit them, that means that we have to do drainage. So we're doing drainage for two reasons, correct? One is because we're actually removing the drainage pipe, and the second is because of, I know we're on existing impervious, but if you do new build, even though it's existing, doesn't that sometimes also trigger some things? Can you walk us through what's required here, please?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, the triggers are because we are increasing the impervious surface, right? And the other trigger is that we are modifying the existing drainage system, right? We have a pipe that runs beneath the proposed addition, which is going to be relocated. And as a result of that, that puts us into updating the drainage and making revisions to the system. So as part of that, what we're looking at is new basins. You can see a couple new catch basins around the building, because in order to accommodate this addition, there's some minor regrading that's also happening. So we're creating some low spots and where we can collect the drainage into new catch basins, and then pipe it into the existing drainage system, which we tie into at the very end of our detention basin.
Okay. And in terms of either square footage and or percentage, how are we evaluating the increase in impervious? Like, again,
what we look at is just the total area, the total area that's increased compared to the existing. So it's basically a comparison between proposed and existing conditions. And then our calculations develop a delta of how much we need to infiltrate or how much we need to reduce the runoff. And that dictates the size of the stormwater management basin that you see on the right.
Okay. Thank you.
If there's another, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we did, I do have one more question. And this basically, Joe, when you talked about this in design, you were explaining that this would basically solve what FEMA category of storm?
Okay, yeah. So what we do when we do these, the town standard is for a 25-year design, but we do look all the way up to 100 because there is a detention facility involved.
Okay.
Right? You don't want that overtopping, for a storm event that has a 4% chance in any year occurring in any year. What we usually do is, and this is recommended practice, to design it for a 100-year, so that that detention basin on the right can hold the 100-year storm, which is a storm that has a 1% chance of happening in any given year. So theoretically, you could have a 100-year storm in consecutive years, or you can even have them in the same year.
What is a 100-year storm? How many inches of rain?
A 100-year storm right now, based on the current criteria, is about 9 inches of rain in a 24-hour period.
A hurricane, in other words. A major hurricane.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it would be somewhere between the July storm that we had last year and the September storm. The July one was a 50-year storm, and the September was about a 250-year storm.
Okay. So as we move forward, and will you explain as you hit the different drainage systems, sort of what they're solving for?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
And now I'll introduce Sean Ragan, and he can go through the landscape design.
All right, thank you, Eric. So my focus is really targeted towards the courtyard and the entry plaza at Hindley. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll look at the courtyard. So our intent here is to work with the framework that Eric outlined, the Board of Education guidelines, and transpose those to the outside. This space, we want it to be an outdoor space that is flexible in its use. It can accommodate a range of either outdoor learning, formal teaching, or more casual activities in the space, but also more casual gathering of students. So there are a few basic components that we integrate into this and to the other three courtyards throughout the three projects. That is seating for the teaching and for the engagement. Each of these also has a playful poured-in-place rubberized surface, and as well as a performance platform that doubles as a seating area. Next slide, please. The next space is the front entry plaza, and this space is responding to the more formal nature of the front entry with its column facade. And the design is symmetrical in its shape, and it incorporates two different steps that allow for a level platform and a seating area for a sort of wide area in which people can enter into the school and have a first impression of the school. So we're envisioning special paving in the center of the space that would be flanked by seating on either side.
I guess one thing that we were really surprised about here when we were out there and we actually looked at the grades is that there's a 3-foot grade difference between where the bus drop off is and where the front door is. And so, as Sean mentioned, we're creating a set of 2 sets of steps, so that you go up to a level area, have the seating, and then you continue up to the top. And what also is part of this is that there's a ramp off to the side, so that there's an accessible way to get to the front door as well as to the central platform.
Okay. So this next drawing here is the site plan for Holmes Elementary. And the principal feature here is, like, as we discussed earlier, the Curtis property, the additional parking, as well as the service drive leading from the parking lot to the rear service areas.
Joe, can
yes.
I stop you a sec? Travis, I think you might want, can we enlarge that so that people can see that section? Because that's really where the majority of the discussion is.
Okay, great. Thanks, Travis. And you can also see the proposed relocated generator in that area as well. We also have made some modifications to the curb line in front of the building to accommodate the addition. And because we are making those curb line changes, we also added a accessible drop-off space.
Joe, can I stop you a second again?
Sure.
Because this is kind of a run through, and we're going to be doing this for the board next week. Travis, if you can get your cursor there to be that big red dot, it's much easier to see than.
Yeah. All right.
Isn't that at the bottom of the page?
Yeah, except when I zoom for whatever reason.
Oh, you
but
can't
yes,
do it there?
I can switch to the go-to dot.
That's perfect.
Different dots.
Okay.
All good.
So now Holmes is different than the other two campuses, where most of the addition will be occurring on areas that are currently not paved, right? So Holmes has the biggest delta in terms of the addition of impervious surface, which means it'll require a larger stormwater management system. So for that reason, we have to take a concept like we're doing at Hindley, where we're detaining the stormwater on site. We have to kind of enlarge that just because of the scale of the additional impervious surface. So we have a larger stormwater management facility here to treat and infiltrate the stormwater. So what we're proposing here is a 2-cell stormwater basin where the discharge from the parking lot comes in on the northern cell. You can see the pipe leading into there. And then what that does, it allows these any grit, sand that tends to collect in stormwater. It allows that to settle out. So it's confined in one place. And as that cell fills, it overflows into the next one, which provides some additional storage. So it delays the release of stormwater. And then when that fills, it then will overflow a stabilized crest. So imagine it kind of like a mini dam. And then it overflows towards the west as it does today. We did have an on-site meeting with the town's inland wetlands officer, and he did like this concept. So that was good news. He thought we were heading in the right direction with that. And again, the whole purpose of this is to reduce the peak flow, which is how much runoff flows from the site at any given time, how fast it comes off the site, as well as how much of it comes off the site. So it's peak flow and volume that we're treating here. Also, we are constructing new trash enclosures at the top of the driveway, surface driveway. And we did overlay a truck turning template to ensure that the trash hauling vehicle can make it through there and execute a 3-point turn, come in and come out. And then just as with Hindley, we are not proposing to resurface the existing parking lot or replace existing sidewalks, except in the area where we're made those curb line changes in front of the new addition.
Any questions?
Yes. Joe, on the drainage piece, so that is solving for what kind of storm?
Okay, all these systems have been designed for the 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all just to clarify, the detention piece is sized for the 100. The conveyance, the pipes are still a 25, which is standard procedure.
Okay.
Yes, but
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then which conforms to the town's stormwater management standards in section 880 of the regs.
Okay, and how big is the detention piece for this one? How much is it? Do you know? Off.
In terms of square footage?
Or how many gallons, or whatever the correct measure for water
that
is.
I don't have that number. I can find it, but I don't have it with me right at this moment.
Okay. And then am I correct in saying that one of the advantages of using the Curtis property is that this enables us to put drainage for the entire campus inside of this property that's currently unused? So is that correct? This is actually
Yeah,
solving.
right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. You know, it's that's the natural low point for the campus. And your stormwater facilities are best placed near the lowest point because, by gravity, everything tends to drain in that direction. So yeah, this is definitely the place for it.
Okay. So just as the, engineer that you are, if I were to ask you, should we pay this money, to get parking, the answer is probably a lot more complicated than that. Right.
Right, exactly, right. Because there's a lot of grading that gets tied into it. There's certain advantages to having the parking. I particularly with the service drive.
Yeah.
I think that is a tremendous asset. It gives you 360-degree access for fire apparatus, for example.
Okay. Yeah. And that's. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That is something that if on any campus, if you could do that, that's something you want to see done, correct?
Absolutely right. Yeah. To the extent that you can get a fire apparatus all the way around a building, it's certainly better.
Okay.
I'm sure the fire marshal would endorse that. Yeah.
Okay.
So right, and also it just gives you more flexibility in case there's some activity going on elsewhere on campus. It gives you another way in.
Okay.
I kind of want to remind everybody that we are also proposing to use this as the construction access way as well. So Travis, if you can zoom out a little bit. So this shows that would be, now you're really far out, but at the bottom of the page, the bus drop-off loop would also be if we didn't have access on the top of the page on the north side of the building, that construction access would be required to come across the bottom and then ascend up the backside there. And that's where all the kids on a daily basis play, and that's where recess happens. So we're really trying to separate construction traffic and the students. And the best way to do that is to create this temporary road, which ultimately, as we went through the discussions here, became a recommendation as a permanent road for both servicing the dumpsters as well as for emergency vehicles if necessary.
Mm-hmm. Is there another location where we could reasonably put parking if we didn't want to go into Curtis, pretending we ignore everything else we've discussed?
So if you can zoom back into that, well, stay there, right there. Travis, if you can show the top of the page, there's 4 or 5 parking spaces at the top of the page.
Mm-hmm.
That's being proposed to make up that additional 20 spaces that we're trying to gain. If Travis, you can point out in the middle there, right as you come in the front entrance, directly opposite, and it's in a light gray, is where, Travis, can you go to the middle there, up higher? You're still in the wrong color, so it's hard to see you. Down, right opposite the front door, that right there, that area right there. No, you moved it. Go up, 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 up. Travis, right opposite the entrance, right there. I don't know what's going on.
What's right? This is main entrance.
No,
Right here.
no, the front, the
Oh,
entrance
sorry.
from the street. Entrance
Sorry.
from the street. No. You were right where you're supposed to be, please.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna get this is
entry
this
drive.
Vehicle entrance.
Vehicle.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right, I'm not speaking English. I'm sorry.
Yes.
But yes, the
Vehicle.
entrance drive directly opposite there, that's a road
Mm-hmm.
that extends back to the service right there.
Yes.
So if you had the blue square or circle, whatever that thing was, that's
Mm-hmm.
where we could have 4 to 6 parking spaces in addition. But obviously that would preclude service access if we had that service drive. But if we eliminated that service drive, we could probably add 4 or 5 additional parking spaces in that zone and eliminate some of the need for the parking, but you wouldn't get up to the 95 parking spaces, which is part of the ed specs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Travis.
Yeah, no problem. I'll let Eric drive next time.
Might be a good choice.
So that's all I had, Travis.
We'll go next. All right.
Sean?
Sure. If we can go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So again, my focus has been on the courtyard space. So we're going to talk about that right now. Next slide, please. And in concept, we're incorporating the same materiality with the same intended use, flexible use of seating elements along the sides for casual and formal use, playful seating within, and a raised platform that can be used for performances or seating, or it tends to be a magnet for kids just playing. This is going to sit just between the library and the outdoor asphalt play space. So we're envisioning this that will serve both uses. The students can come out from the library with their teachers. Conversely, during play, there'll be opportunity to use this space at those times as well.
Thanks, Sean. And if we can go to the last school, to Royal, in the site work.
All right, so here we are at Royal. One of the things I did want to point out, we do show some parking expansion here. That's still in flux, so I understand that's still in discussion, but as a concept of where some parking could potentially go out there. And we might have a room for an additional 4 spaces on the east side of the campus, where I'm showing the 4 spaces right now. For this one, stormwater management is a little different. Our low point where the school naturally wants to discharge, you try to keep your stormwater management systems closer to the source of the runoff. So, I'm thinking here, the new addition areas. And but we do have a field right in front of us. So in this one, we're proposing underground storage chambers as opposed to a surface pond. Basically, these perform the same functions, but it's just put underground. So there's some additional maintenance requirements. They're not particularly onerous, provided that you have upstream controls such as deep sump catch basins, all things that are achievable and fairly small incremental cost over what you would do otherwise. But what we're proposing here are these again, these stormwater infiltration chambers. They're designed for a 100-year storm event, and they perform the same function. They retain that stormwater on the site and slowly release it over time, so that you manage the amount that's flowing off the site, so it's not coming off too fast. But it also has the added effect of, just like the other ponds, of infiltrating that stormwater, some of that back into the ground. So you're discharging less towards the street, and more of it will go into the ground. And again, this is required because there is a slight increase in impervious surface here. I was excited to see that a lot of this activity is occurring on existing pavement, and we're also cutting back, adding some green space here. So that is a great benefit from a stormwater management perspective. And my initial instinct is that the size of these systems that we show here schematically will probably decrease. But that's the stormwater concept that we're looking at here. And as you can see, we're also introducing a pathway that goes around the east side of the building, connecting to the rear. Which will continue facilitate pedestrian access around.
Questions? Okay.
So again, our focus was on the courtyard space, which in this case was quite a bit larger than the other two. So we have the benefit of both size, and it opens up to the athletic fields. So I think it has a larger sense of scale.
Actually, Travis, can you go back that last slide? And can you show where that existing library is because it shows how close that library is to the 1996 wing. That it's very tight in there. So that's one of the issues that we're solving as part of this project. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
That's fine. So the space is really broken down into 3 different spaces, with the upper 2 serving the academic wings on either side. These are patio spaces that could have tables and chairs that students and classrooms could come out and use, again, for formal teaching or just for activities. It could be a hardscape space, so chalk on the pavement as well could be an activity that could occur here. Those would be enclosed by landscape green and be visually connected to the corridors that they are adjacent to. So there'd be they'd sort of be a welcome destination for students. Next slide, please. Out in the larger space of the courtyard, we still have our same components that we've been incorporating: playful play surfacing, wood platform, and seating. In Royal, now we also have the opportunity for more space, and in this case, we're using it for passive recreation, a lawn that we also incorporating some seating elements such as natural boulders that can be used for seating and play as well. So in general, both with the elements that we've incorporated that are consistent with all the 3 schools, as well as the lawn, this is just a very flexible space. And then the access ways, the pathways through, provide access out to the outer loop pathway. Thank you.
With that,
at Royal in particular, we also talked about that design, making it possible for that to be used for like performance space or other types of because you have that lengthy. So if you had an audience, you could do that at Royal, right?
Yes, that's. Thank you for touching on that. We talked about it lends itself well to having a stage at the end and gathering. So if there's ceremony or graduation or anything in between, you can accommodate that here. There is a low seat wall that is the white shape around the playful resilient surfacing. That's necessary to keep that surface at a accessible, in compliance with accessibility requirements, so no more than 2%. So we will have about a 12 or 15-inch grade change there, which is something that can be seen over. But beyond that, it's open and flexible.
So you can get a chair up onto the space. You just have to go up over a lip, if you will.
Yes, the accessible connection to the play space would be at either corner, the left and right corners that are, Travis, if you can point to it, that are headed towards the patios. Those would be the flush connections. And then where the white starts, the edge, that's where a wall would slowly reveal itself. So the top of the wall would stay level while the pathway around it would be descending slightly. The natural slope of this area is we're a little high up in the patios and then out at the outer loop road a few feet lower. So there's just a very modest slope that occurs throughout the space. And this wall, very low seat wall, is being used to resolve that and make this play space happen.
Okay. But you can easily, if you have mobility impairment, you can easily at those corners get onto the...
You could easily get in. It's wide enough and the slopes are not in excess on the pathway to be non-compliance with ADA. They do not require handrails. They're under 5%.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll turn it over to our BGA mechanical electrical team, Paul Gallagher and Vince Restivo.
Okay, yeah, I notice a lot of times when we start talking about mechanical electrical systems, people tend to glaze over. So I'll be quick. but at the same time, please feel free to stop me and ask questions if I'm going too fast. First, I think you should know that we met out in the field, our team with KG&D, with O&G, and then Paul and Kevin from the district. We walked through most spaces in all three buildings and discussed this in detail. So I'll just hit the high points here. Our design considerations are comfort, ventilation quality, energy efficiency, updated controls, easy maintenance, low noise, aesthetics, budget, and then code compliance, including the Connecticut high performance.
Can I, Paul, jump in? This is Frank.
Yes.
And given my background, don't worry, I won't gloss over this section. I don't see on here what, in thinking about this, since I've been on the committee now for 2.5, 3 months, and being in Henley pretty regularly, and knowing that school intimately well, the first thing on my design consideration was the installation, ductwork versus refrigerant piping. I don't see that on here, so it is just something I'd like you to address, whether it's on this page or going forward, because as I think of the, what best way to heat and cool, ventilation is ventilation. It's ductwork. It needs to be. But heating and cooling, obviously you have your rooftop units, your packaged units, which are incorporated into your design. The VRF systems, which are obviously incorporated. And then you have, what I'll call conventional systems, what probably everybody on this phone has in their backyard with central air conditioning in their homes. While you may not necessarily think of them for an institutional facility, they work, have their restrictions just like everybody else. So in thinking of those three, the first thing that comes to my mind is how hard or easy or impossible is it to install what goes into it? So did you think through that in terms of, Henley looks to me like above the tiled ceilings in the hallway, for example, you had feet of, above the ACT ceiling, you had a couple of feet to the slab. So, running ductwork, I didn't jump up there with a ladder, but seemed possible. But if that's something you considered and there's just too much stuff in the way, can you just talk about that as part of the design considerations?
Sure. And there's a slide later on, but I'll tell you one thing that we're doing is that we're using 100% outside air energy recovery systems for just ventilation. So it's tempered ventilation. So that means the ductwork gets very small. If you were going to air condition with air, the amount of air you'd have to move is huge. So your ductwork would get very large. So that's one strategy. The 40s wings has very high floor-to-floor heights, so we will have room in the ceilings there for terminal cassette units in each space. And what that does for you is it gives you individual control, and then now you're just running refrigerant piping, which is relatively small compared to ductwork.
No, I understand that. That's part of the question, which is, do you have the space to even run the ductwork? And anyway, God, I'll let you go through the presentation. But again, it was in the design considerations to me, just, how hard in an existing building, whether it's a school or anything else, how hard or easy is it to install these retrofitted systems? So I do want to understand that a little bit. Also, just in terms of how you're doing this, your tonnage is tonnage. So if I just to set parameters, you have about 25 classrooms in each of the buildings. Is that correct? 24, 24, and 22 is, Jill, did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't know who to address all my questions to. If each classroom is 800 to 900 square feet, your talking like 3 to 4 tons of it? I assume with large windows, probably no new insulation being put in, 3 to 4 tons of AC in each room?
We're
Each
about 4 to
classroom?
5.
4 to 5. Okay, even better. I think that's great. Is it the primary source of heat? You've got obviously a discussion on boilers, which you'll address, but the primary source of heat is not going to be the heat pumps, correct?
Well, wait, we should go through the whole thing first because I'm addressing all that. You're going to have redundant systems. You're going to have a heat pump system, which is your cassettes and your unit ventilators. And then you're also going to have hot water boilers and fin tube radiation and hot water unit ventilators. So you're going to have 100% redundant systems in every building. We're keeping the hot water that you have. We're converting the steam that you have. We're getting rid of your antiquated steam, and we are converting all that to hot water. So you're going to have 100% redundant systems, whether it's gas or oil, in the case of Royal, or electricity throughout. So let's go through this, and hopefully this will answer some of your questions. But again, feel free to stop me if you have additional questions. So here at this slide, we have we're getting rid of all your steam. The new gas-fired boilers we're putting in are high efficiency and much smaller. And as the district requested, we're going to do slightly larger capacity for future expansion. We're going to have the VRF heat pumps, and then hot water radiation and upgraded ventilation systems. Electrically, you have some LED lighting and some that's fluorescent. Getting rid of all that. We're doing all LED, keeping the LED that you have. Our office is going to provide power and pathways for low voltage data and security. And we're going to work with your data consultants, and they're going to design your low voltage and data systems. Each building is going to get a new electric service due to the new increased air conditioning load. And then your fire protection systems will all be expanded to cover the new additions. Next slide. So up in the right there, you see your new fancy condensing high efficiency boilers. And on the lower right there is your fin tube radiation, which will be in every room. Again, you're going to have 2 heat sources. You'll have complete redundancy. We don't know what the cost of electricity is going to do. We don't know whether, oil or gas. We don't know what all that's going to be, 5, 10, 15 years from now. So you're going to have the option to heat your building either with all electric or all gas oil or a hybrid. You might want to use your hot water systems like maybe in the unoccupied mode in night setback. Just run some hot water around your building so that you just keep it from getting too cold. Next slide.
So the redundancy, Paul, is based on the price of whether it's the electric for the heat pumps or the oil or gas for the boiler. Because redundancy, I'm not right now. The buildings I assume just have. Well, you're saying they have steam, but they have baseboard heating. What I'll just refer loosely. And that seems to be sufficient. Obviously, the buildings don't have AC, so anything is an upgrade. But is in your calculations the hot water system enough to properly heat approximately 800 square foot classrooms?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then some. With
Okay.
our these new condensing boilers are very small.
I know.
Yeah, so we're going to have adequate capacity, and I'll point out also that a good portion of your buildings are already hot water, and I think that was one of the district's decisions early on. Why throw away that infrastructure that's in good shape? Now the steam, on the other hand, that's antiquated, and it's a great idea to get rid of that. But with a little effort, we convert the steam to hot water. Now you have you have hot water, and you have electric with the new systems we're putting in. All right. Here you'll see in this slide on the upper right, those are your condensing units. All of that equipment will be on your roofs. The lower right, that's an example of the cassettes that I talked about earlier. That will be in each classroom or even smaller spaces. The middle one on the bottom, that's a unit ventilator. Where you have existing unit ventilators, we thought it would be most cost effective to just take that old one out and put a new one in that has a hot water coil and a VRF coil. So that one piece of equipment will be redundant. You can run on electricity or hot water or gas. Next slide.
Just a question again. Are you thinking about, in terms of the rooftop? I mean, I've looked through the slides, so I don't mean to jump ahead, but I didn't see a picture of the rooftop in terms of the space. You're going to have, again, by my calculation, 6 or 7 of these twin Bldg units on the roof to get the tonnage you need. In other words, you're not taking up a massive footprint on the roof. You're going to have
really
each
isn't.
one of these units serve 5 classrooms.
Well, when Erica and Travis were showing you their videos, you could see the mechanical equipment on there. And if you didn't notice, that's probably a good thing because the footprint is not huge. It is a big piece of equipment. They are those condensing units are probably 7 feet tall, but you can put them right up against each other too. So the footprint, it's not a huge footprint.
No, but in terms of how many, again, I'm just trying to, you're going to have one of these units. 16 ton is sort of the biggest they come in. So, and that's 2 of them together. So if you had 16 ton divided by 4 to 5 tons per classroom, each of these, and for everybody on the call to know, those pictures that say LG, two of those, again, my opinion, obviously the engineers are the experts here in terms of the design, but 2 of those systems will be required for every 3 classrooms. Paul, is that about right? So
I don't know offhand. I don't know the tonnage of each one of those roof-mounted condensing units, but there's probably 10 to 15 on each building. And what we try to do is we don't want to put them all in one spot either, because then your refrigerant runs get really long. So we try to cluster them together in spots around the building. So there may be clusters of 5, maybe 3 different spots on your roof.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get more to the question of my biggest concern with the VRF heat pumps. And again, just so you have some basis, I own an AC company. I install these things all over New York City, hundreds of them a year. So I have nothing against them. I make a living off of them. But their reliability, I work for, engineers, architects, and developers. And these are being put in all over New York City right now. The reliability is a little questionable because although they give a lot of independent control to, in this case, classrooms, in the case of what I do, apartment units, tenants in apartment units, user error and computer glitches, because these things are basically just big dumb machines, often result in these things going down until a service company can come out and address the issue. And so the reliability factor to me is an issue. Now, the reason why I'm asking how many of these, it's not to impress everyone with my knowledge of AC tonnage, but if you're going to have basically one of these systems per classroom, less chance of more people being affected by an outage. If you're going to have one of these systems serve 2, 3, or 4 classrooms, again, if you have a teacher in one hitting the button and a teacher in the other hitting the button, these will eventually go down.
Well, we can eliminate, actually, it's by the controls, we can eliminate anybody touching it at all. Where you have a central computer which are, your control system, where the district controls the temperature in every room.
Yeah, with the central controller, I think that's great. So again, my concern just gets to, these things, their finickiness, if you will, and one unit on the system being affected and impacting the rest of the system. So with that, I guess my question is just, when you guys looked at VRF as one method of heating and cooling, and then we'll call it redundant heat, did you look at, I'm sure you did, what were the results when you looked at this versus, again, just instead of having 15 or 20 massive units, or whatever you said, 15, 16 massive units, having basically one, as we all know, one of those round conventional systems, a 5-ton heat pump on the roof, just serving each classroom directly. So kind of more one-to-one, if you will. And then finally, just putting in some more packaged units and running some duct work. So when you consider those, what were the considerations, the cost savings, the long-term view on electricity pricing? How did you sort of analyze those three and land on this one?
Well, first of all, this is really the industry standard for air source heat pumps. If we were to put a condensing unit for every cassette unit, you'd have hundreds of them, and the chances of those breaking.
I'm not suggesting one cassette. In other words, you basically just have, like, again, it's just so everyone can relate to this. I'm sorry to keep repeating myself. In everyone's home here, most of your homes on this call are fairly large, right? We all have homes in the multi-thousand, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square foot. You have one ducted unit in your attic, typically one unit in your basement, and there's ductwork that you don't see. So you have two machines. So I wasn't suggesting running conventional systems to cassettes. I agree, that would be too many cassettes. It would be much more piping. It would be a higher cost. But basically having, somewhere softeted in the classroom, a ducted unit, and then ductwork you probably need 2 or 3 taps into an 800 square foot classroom. So on that one, it wouldn't be cassette units. So traditional ducted, just like we all use in our homes.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, that's a whole different type of system. Energy recovery, I think your first point is having space to get all this into these buildings. Energy recovery, the ductwork gets really small. And you can do one energy recovery unit can do 10 classrooms with ductwork that's really small. If you were going to do ducted systems here, your ceiling heights would have to drop. The disruption would be considerable. Plus, we got to go floor to floor with all that. Is that what you would prefer seeing?
Paul, I don't think that was.
I just want to get to the right, understand the thought process. Again, I'm trying to, in my role as on the committee here, just, question and knowing a little bit about this stuff, certainly enough to be dangerous, say, there's a few other ways you could do this. And doing this day to day, I see the negatives and the positives in each of these systems. But I do look at, a simpler system as a potential. And I sometimes question the VRF simplicity and the user error, which again, you'll take out a little bit by having, I imagine, again, if you're going to give all this control, if you're going to upgrade these systems, but not allow a teacher, because the room is too hot or cold, to adjust, again, is that part of the ed spec? So that the teachers are not going to be allowed to adjust these things? I think you said
we can if you want. That's up to the district. There's all the security protocol that you would design into it, or you would when it's being programmed, what your preferences are.
Of course. And I would have to imagine, again, Jill, you can address it, or someone who's seen the ed specs. I imagine you're going to give some level of control from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon
Hey guys, I'd like to just jump in for a second if I could. Frank's obviously got a lot of questions, and he's obviously got a lot of expertise, as does, the Brdg Gallagher guys. But there's an awful lot of people on the call for whom this is not an area of familiarity. And we're 2 hours into this meeting, and we still have an awful lot of wood to chop tonight. I might suggest, because it doesn't sound like Frank's going to get his, everything answered to his satisfaction tonight, that we build a fence around, metaphorically, the MEP part of this discussion. Maybe we set up a separate session with the engineering folks and Frank and maybe Paul Harding and anybody else from the committee who wants to join, so that Frank can get all of his questions addressed and we can cover the rest of the material. And to the extent that we can't approve the schematics as they relate to the MEP systems, we put those aside, try to approve everything else so that we can keep moving forward. Otherwise, I think we'll end up here all night. And again, for a lot of folks, this is an area that we don't have, me personally, for example, have no expertise.
Well, I think that's a good idea. We're going to have a meeting. We were going to request right after schematic design with the same group, whether it's KG&D, our office, O&G, Paul Harding, Kevin Monrette, and Frank, if you'd like to attend that, that's going to be in the next week or so.
Well, what I would actually respectfully request is you guys don't just schedule a meeting and then invite me if I want to be there. It feels like I'm supposed to be a core person in that as part
You
of
are,
this committee. And again, if that's not correct,
You are.
then Jill and Chris, I apologize. That's not my understanding of.
You are correct, Frank. And this is something that we can clarify with Brdg Gallagher. So that's not something they may or may not.
We'll accommodate you, Frank, of course.
So Frank is a newer member of our committee, but we're grateful for his expertise and is a member of the MEP team. So yes, he would be on your invite list when you schedule the meeting. And
very much on the exact same footing as Paul Harding. Right?
Okay.
So.
Well, maybe the first step, Frank, did you get a copy of all the MEP drawings?
Nope. I've asked for them a number of times and have been told they don't exist, but if that's wrong, please send them on over.
You mean the existing condition? You mean the existing conditions, or what's been produced?
No, the schematic design drawings.
Well, if you actually have mechanical I mean, the electric and the plumbing are great, but if you have mechanical drawings, I would love to get my hands on those.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you guys, let me just say, I'm sure you guys have thought this through extensively. I'm not questioning any of the work you've done, but again, just having some practical experience, there are other ways to do it. And again, that whole list of the items you considered or there. The other thing to me, as I said, was the ease of installation. We're trying to fit new stuff into an old building, so you've got constraints, you've got field conditions. So that's all. And I'm not at all suggesting I'm going to get to a different place than you, but I would like to understand it a little bit. And some of the redundancy stuff, again, that's, I think, something that Chris and Jill tell me is probably broader for the committee, whether you want to call it value engineering or whatever, but redundancy, I mean, Paul, you just are putting redundancy in. I assume that's in the specs. Obviously, you're not just coming up with that on your own. At some point, the committee, if we could save, $3, $4, $5 million across 3 schools by not having redundancy, which we may never use, it's something I guess we should consider. But that's less of an engineering question, I would imagine, than a committee and budget question.
Again, I'd like to sort of defer this at this point and let you guys have your meeting, have your conversation, give Frank the opportunity to review the drawings, and then we can come back and reconvene, and the committee can consider any changes that come out of those meetings and vote yay or nay on proceeding with the schematics as proposed.
If I could just add to that, it might be that that yes, it might be yay or nay, or it might be that, to Frank's point, the committee wants to make a decision
Right.
one way or another. But yes, I think that sounds great, Chris. Price.
Is that
Thank you.
okay?
That's perfect for me. Yeah.
Are there other aspects? I assume, Paul, there's other aspects of the engineering presentation you wanna get to if we defer on the
Yeah, the mechanical's
mechanicals.
almost done. So, Travis, why don't you go to the next slide? So we're going to
Keep going,
do,
Travis. Yeah.
yeah, the package roof
Again, I would
recognition
just
for
move
large
off of. I would
spaces.
just move anything that relates to HVAC. Let's defer at this point.
Okay, keep going. Keep going. Keep going, Travis. There you go. Plumbing. One question you're going to have to answer is whether you want hardwired or battery automatic fixtures here for plumbing. I don't know. We probably don't have to do that now. You want to go to the next one, Travis? Vince, you want to jump in on the electrical?
Sure. So on the power distribution, we're going to be doing new electrical services at all three buildings. So we're going to be providing new 12208 3000 amp services with surge suppression at all three schools. We are also going to provide circuit breaker provisions for photovoltaic systems that will allow Green Bank to tie in their systems into it. On the lighting, we're going to replace the whatever fluorescent lighting is left in the building throughout the building will be replaced with LED type throughout. We're also going to provide exterior egress emergency lighting fixture. Currently, you only have security fixtures at the doors, but not some of them have some emergency, but not all exit doors have it. So we're going to make sure that that system is complete at every exit door. All emergency lighting will be achieved via integral fixture battery packs, and also we'll provide LED type site lighting that are dark sky compliant as well throughout. If you go to the next one, lighting controls, we're looking to use Watt Stopper as the control systems. And for classrooms and offices, we're looking to have dimmable wall switches, ceiling mounted occupancy sensors, and photo cells that will automatically adjust the lighting in the daylight zones, and that will be mostly in classrooms. So any place where there's windows that has over 150 watts worth of lighting, we'll have that feature installed as well. In the corridors, wherever we're going to be doing new fixtures will be installed. We're looking to have key switches be installed, not regular toggle switches. That'll avoid any kind of student to turn off the lights in the corridor, and only custodial staff or any staff members that have the key will be able to turn on the lights. Ceiling mounted occupancy sensors to control 2 out of 3 non-emergency lighting fixtures. What that allows you to do is have 2 level of controls where you have every third fixture will only work with the key switch, and the other 2 fixtures will work at occupancy sensors. So that way, that allows the corridor never to go totally dark during the day. If everybody ends up being in the classrooms for a while, there will always be lighting in the corridor, which meets all requirements. The bathrooms and storage areas, we're going to have vacancy sensors or toggle switches depending on the scenario, and ceiling mounted occupancy sensors as well. If you could go to the next slide, Travis. And that's it. Well, that's it on the electrical side. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the electrical side.
Travis, you're up.
All right, let's just run through some of the approvals here. Next steps include the town/school board meetings. A lot of this also has to do with kind of the Curtis ask and the roofing ask, but we are meeting right now in the HHR committee on the 11th on Tuesday. We'll present the same presentation to the BOE for their approval. And then the next set of meetings, Jill and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but they pretty much pertain to the funds allocations and regarding the Curtis property, and along with the roofs and having you guys take over the roof portion of the work and getting the proper funds onto this project, because we will need to update our forms to the state if that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, on the assumption that we can, like I said a little earlier on the call, reconcile the estimates as they relate to Curtis and get a little bit more detail
Right.
on the roofs on this timeline.
Yes.
And obviously, there's also the component of Curtis, of just getting the approvals to actually transfer custody and control from the town to the schools. We have to run those traps as well.
Yep. Other next steps include the Architectural Review Board, which we've already started because we've submitted on the 4th, and that's ahead of a hearing on the 18th. And then we're hoping for their determination and action by November 15th. It was determined that there's no Environmental Protection Commission submission required because there are no wetlands on the sites that are being affected. And then the next step is the planning and zoning. That's going to be, I think our submission's on the 20th for that, for the hearing in late November on the 29th. And we're expecting those decisions early in the new year. I'm going to skip to the OSCG&R. That is...
Travis, can I just give one? Yeah, I was saying, did you want to just give a quick update on the meeting we had last week, the prep meeting with them, or?
Yeah, the prep meeting went well. That was with Kermit and I'm going to forget her name.
Andrea.
Andrea, thank you.
Yep.
That was with Kermit and Andrea. So they're aware of the project. Obviously, the preliminary paperwork has been submitted for the grant, and that we need to really gear up now for a schematic design review set of documents for late October. So we'll be working with ONG to compile that paperwork. We'll have to set a date really to get that paperwork in so we can schedule the meeting, because they're going to need the paperwork before we go ahead with that meeting. And then the design development review is going to happen late, probably mid-late December, followed by the final pre-bid conformance review in February. We need to go through that review before we go out to bid on the project. The December meeting, we're going to want kind of all our final costs in line and on the forms for that submission of the design development review forms. And they're very accommodating. They're available via cell if we have any questions for Kermit or Andrea. So the next steps are really just setting up that paperwork. Connecticut DOT, Joe, I don't know if you had an update. I thought I saw an email coming today that I didn't get a chance to look at, but yep.
Yeah, I can give a quick update on the DOT approvals. In terms of OSTA, we do not need to submit at this point in time because we don't meet the thresholds for having to go to OSTA. That could change if there's some signal timing issue that needs to be updated, but that doesn't appear to be the case at the moment. In terms of the encroachment permit, which will include the change to the curb cut on Hindley, as well as that median and the post road. We have started some behind the scenes discussions with DOT District 3. They haven't said no, so that's a good work by that. But that permit we'll submit our formal documents to them at the same time as the Town Planning and Zoning Commission. The encroachment permit is something that the contractor ultimately applies for because there's insurance and bonding requirements. It's directly related to construction, but we'll lay the groundwork to expedite that process for when the contractor does apply.
And Joe, that needs to be approved by them before we give final submission to the state. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, worst case is if we need it to before they approve us to go to bid. Essentially, is what we need.
Yeah.
And are we feeling at the moment, as much as we can predict the state DOT, which is not much, but that we are on target to meet those timelines, or do we have any concerns at this stage?
Yeah, not at this point.
At what point would we start to worry, Joe?
I would say if they start pushing back, or if we hear negative feedback, I would start getting concerned. But you know, the encroachment permit, they're pretty good about, because that's handled at the district level. It doesn't go up to Newington. But we just want to, you know, get them involved early in the process, which is what we've done. So to try to head off any possible concerns early in the process as we can.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
So with that, that's the end of bullet point 4, presentation schematic design review. So that went quickly,
right.
didn't it?
Yeah. Thank you guys. You put a lot of work into this. I guess I would urge, so that it doesn't lag the rest of this, on the assumption that the committee approves everything that has been presented this evening, but for the MEP aspects of it, in particular the HVAC aspects of it. I would urge the meeting that Paul Gallagher was describing, that would include Frank and Paul Harding and Kevin Monrette, to happen as soon as possible, so that we can hopefully have that aspect of the project catch up with everything else.
Kevin is on vacation this week, so
Okay.
next week, early next week, perhaps. He's back, Alan, early next week.
Dr. Adley, I think you're still muted.
Either muted or bad connection. Yeah. Anyway, when Kevin gets back, so coordinating schedules with Kevin and Frank and Paul so that that meeting can occur as soon as possible.
Yeah, we'll
Can
set
I-
something up for next week.
Yeah, can I guess, you know, Eric and Paul, I guess as far as, you know, we know that between now and the Board of Ed meeting, you're looking for some approval to go ahead, I guess, is, you know, what's your threshold relative to this HVAC discussion and then, you know, maintaining the traction we need on the design development phase of the project?
Well, I'm thinking, Jill, unless you think differently, you know, Board of Ed, that meeting is scheduled. It's Tuesday, and there's a lot for them to look at. That may just need to, the HVAC aspects of it may need to be a separate presentation and a separate meeting once Frank and Paul have gotten comfortable, because frankly, the rest of the committee is going to be looking to them for their recommendation, because they're the experts, right? So I think, Dave, the idea would be we present everything but that to the Board of Education on Tuesday, and then if we need to reconvene, we need to reconvene, whether that's a special. And here's where I start, my ignorance of the procedural aspects starts to show, but if we can reconvene, we may need to reconvene.
Eric, have you encountered this before? And if you have, how have you handled it?
Well, obviously, we want to move forward with the entire project as quickly as we can. This whole project is time sensitive. We're trying to get documents done by the end of January. So, you know, it sounded like, Paul, what day was the meeting this next week that was proposed? And assuming that Frank can also attend?
We don't have a meeting scheduled yet.
All right. So I would recommend that you all talk tomorrow, try to set something. I realize that Kevin's away, but I'm sure that Kevin will try to accommodate other schedules, that if we could meet, let's say during the day on Tuesday and go through this, that would be very helpful to the overall process. You know, again, for us to wait two weeks or something like that for this decision from the Board of Ed would really sort of be difficult, because we would really just have to put the mechanical systems on hold for that period of time, and everything else, to be quite honest, because of the schedule that we have, we are proceeding at the moment at our own risk, with the expectation that this project will be approved and we can continue. But that's just the way that the schedule is set up to meet the goals.
Okay. Understood. Totally understood. But as you see, Frank's got some significant and legitimate questions, and I'm not going to jam them.
No,
not gonna do.
and we agree 100%. It would have been great if Frank was involved earlier. Let's catch him up. We should go through the different systems that had been proposed, because this wasn't the only one. We had discussed a more conventional system, and then we had also had discussed at one point a ground source heat pump system. So there were different systems that had been discussed at the beginning, and it was quickly determined that this was the best approach because of space and all the other things. And we don't need to go through that again tonight. But
yeah, I mean, look,
it
is what it is what it is, right? Frank joined the committee. Frank is an important part of the committee. He joined the committee later because a prior member had to drop off, and so if we're playing catch up, we're playing catch up. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about that.
No, we can't, and we'll get there. We're gonna get there. It's just
Chris and Jill, if I could just suggest this meeting, just so again we're not going back and doing things twice. A lot of my questions are going to be around, again, why do we need redundancy? These are things someone who knows those ed specs should probably be a part of these meetings. Not all of my questions, in fact, most are probably not going to be technical. They're going to be, again, why do we need to give classroom 1A heat while classroom 1B gets the choice for cool? Again, how many days of the year are shoulder days? So these are all things that are very meaningful to the budget or to the cost. I looked at Henley, $5 million for Henley. If you make this a heat pump system versus a heat recovery, I bet that goes to 4.5 million immediately. So that's 500,000. I could be wrong. Again, I'm not, but someone needs to tell. Eventually, I'm going to say, hey, if you did this, it would be $500,000 less potentially. So someone has to say,
understood,
well,
but understood. And again, this isn't, I don't think anyone's prepared to have that conversation right now, but yes, but we'll also have to balance that against the recommendations from both you and the engineers as to what the best system is technologically and what's going to be the best thing long-term for the schools and the district, right?
But Chris, isn't that a question back to the district? Do the engineers, Paul is going to give you whatever system you want. If you want every classroom to be able to have heat and cold separately, that's not really a question for the engineers. That's a question for what we want to give our teachers as tax-paying members of the community. So again, that's not just up to me. My opinion is they don't really need it. There's going to be a couple of shoulder days. It's a little too hot for most people. Are going to want heat. A couple of classrooms may be hot because of sun exposure. They can open the windows. Vice versa, put a sweater on. That's not a question to any of the folks on the engineering or architectural side. That's really a question to us as the taxpayers, what we want to give these folks. So should you guys, either you or Jill or someone, be a fly on the wall or a participating member of that meeting?
So can I suggest that from a matter of process, what we do is we approve the schematic designs with a contingency for MEP. And if the meeting on Tuesday concludes that we need to think differently, that we'll plan. Otherwise, it will move forward as it is. And that gives us a little bit of window. If Frank and Paul and Kevin decide that we need to change it, then we've got to very quickly move to get another subcommittee meeting and figure out how to move forward. Maybe even Tuesday afternoon. But if we build ourselves the opportunity that if there are no changes, then it can move forward as proposed. That just gives us a little bit of a lever. Does that make sense?
Except for the fact that whoever put those ed specs, again, the engineers and I are going to be talking about how to give you what the ed specs call for. So if the ed specs say you want to have two adjacent classrooms, one heat, one cold, I won't even ask that question.
Yeah, no, Frank, I got you. I'm not talking about the mechanicals. I'm talking about from a process perspective. So if what I'm saying is, if you guys review and you decide that the level at which the schematic design is specified is not okay, that it needs additional review, then we will we have path A. But if you take a look and either your questions fall below or are further down the path, or we need to go a different direction, then that's path B. But what I'm trying to do is say that if you're satisfied at the end, we can still go to the Board of Ed with it the way it is. If you're not satisfied, then we choose a different path, right?
Jill and
Because
Chris.
I hear you, Frank. There may be
Sure,
questions.
I'm happy to just present my thoughts to the committee. Again, I don't want unilateral say over this.
No, agreed. You wouldn't have that.
Yeah.
Yep. What's up?
Just in terms of the ed specs,
Yes.
the ed specs for the MEP systems aren't necessarily as detailed
Right.
as what Frank is getting to here. And so there may need to be refinements like we've talked about other refinements educationally to the ed specs. There may need to be refinements to the systems aspect of the ed specs because we have had these meetings along the way here where we've discussed systems, and you as the owner of the school district did direct us in a certain way, like Frank is mentioning here. But when he sees what's written in the ed specs, I think it's going to sort of bring up some questions as to how we want to address those so that they might have a little bit more clarity.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at them specifically with regard to this topic, but my guess is if we looked at them, they're not going to answer Frank's question, right? They're going to be more broadly written than that.
That's
So
correct.
then how about my role to the committee, or to help all of you on the committee, is to present my thoughts based on that discussion and say, okay, listen, I think some of these, we'll call it redundancies, some of these things we're giving. I don't want to take anything away from our teachers. God bless them all for dealing with certainly my children all the time, and educating them. But again, looking out for us and the taxpayers, some of these things, if they're not written in there as requirements, at least have the other 7 or 8 members of you on the committee, plus everyone else involved, understand, again, if we can pull $2, $3, $4 million out of this thing, here's what we're giving up, or whatever. So I can present those. And again, they're not going to be technical questions. I think they really are for the committee and what we're giving the schools.
Well, it's for the committee, and it's for Dr. Adley and the principals and the teachers and their teams.
Sure.
We got to balance that, right? I mean, we have a budget, we have a number that we're working within, sure. And one of the things we said early on in this process was we wanted to be careful about what we were value engineering out, right? If we decide to do that. So, we don't want to, when this is done or it's a couple years down the road, look back and go, okay, we saved, to use your number, $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000, but we didn't get the system that we actually think we should have had.
Oh no, to be clear, that's exactly what I'm addressing, Chris, which is I don't ever want to be in that position of looking back and for a few $100,000 or a few $1 million over the course of 3 schools, looking back and kicking ourselves for not doing it. But these are not questions we would look at. They're questions we can answer today. And again, I'm just asking the question. I'm not even saying how I would vote. So the committee should know whether we look today forward or in 2 years back, do we want to give some of these flexibilities or luxuries?
Well, I think what we need to do is, right now we're just talking in the abstract. I think we need to identify what specifically they are that you're talking about, and then we can talk about them. Right now we're just talking in the abstract. Well, there are things we can have, or there are things we can forego. We need to identify what those are so we can consider them intelligently, and we can consider them with the people who are going to ultimately be the end users.
Right.
Right.
And 2 of those are redundancy, not abstract, but real things. Redundancy, you heard Paul say, duplicative heat by way of heat pumps and boilers, and the flexibility to give each classroom the ability on the same day, same temperature, to have one half hot and one half cold. Those are the very real things. If there are any others, I'll point them out. Not abstract, very real.
And I just think it's unfair to make a decision on that without Kevin here and without having the folks who are going to be dealing with these systems have the opportunity to weigh in on it.
Chris, just one thing, and Jill, what I would just add too is that through this process that certainly Eric, as you and your team see, like when there are critical decisions that have to be made to maintain the schedule that you're working on, that we have that discussion. That way, at least everyone's informed of, listen, these are important decisions, right? And if we need time to make them, we don't want to rush anything. But I just think it's important that as things come up and we do find ourselves possibly deviating from the schedule we were on, that it's important that we all talk about it now, so that when we get to the, as weeks and months go by, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page of where we are. So just if there's critical timing of decisions that has to be made, I just ask that we talk about that outright, so that could be part of the decision process.
Makes sense. So going forward, I think we have a couple of different things on the agenda, right? So the next thing is discussion and possible action regarding the recommendation of the development to add the development of the Curtis property, the project scope. Why don't we go through each one, and when we get to the schematics, we just need to figure out how we're going to word that motion.
Right.
With the and at that time, Eric, walk us through again, please, what the implications are if with what we're going to do tonight. Okay. So next is Curtis, I think.
Yeah. So on Curtis, we've spent a fair amount of time already talking about it, and the tie and bond folks gave us a lot of detail on the benefits of adding it to the scope. Like I said, I think the caveat is we have two different estimates for what we think it's going to cost to integrate it into the project that we need to reconcile. So any motion we make and vote on this evening, I think, would be subject to coming up with an agreement on what we're going to ask from an appropriation standpoint. So, I mean, I guess rather than rehashing Curtis, are there any questions from what was presented by KG&D and by Tie and Bond before we can decide whether we should be adding it to the scope or not? Because it seemed to me like we really covered an awful lot in terms of why it's important to the Holmes school. Then if no questions, I guess I would make a motion that we, Jill, I guess the way we would make the motion is that the committee would request the Board of Education. No? Okay. Because
no, we would actually go to the
we're adding it to the scope. Okay. So
yeah. So
go ahead.
So I'll make a motion to, sorry, Chris, make a motion to add
would recommend
adding, thank you, the Curtis property to the scope, development of the Curtis property to the scope of the HHR building committee.
And then and then the process of actually having the property transferred to custody and control will happen separately, as will the request for the appropriation in the future.
Yes, so we don't have to worry about the request for care, custody, and control. We'll have to come back together to make and decide on what type of appropriation request we would make.
Right, so that's a fairly simple motion, which is that a motion to add the Curtis property to the scope of the design as it relates to the homeschool. So make that motion. Can we get it? Can we get a second on that motion? Frank seconds. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Next item is discussing the addition of the school roof projects for Hindley Homes and Royal to our project scope and integrating it into the design. And as I think you heard from Eric and also from the Bldg and Gallagher team, there's a lot going to be going on at the roofs of these schools. There had been a proposal before our committee was stood up to put solar panels, photovoltaic systems on the roof. There have been ongoing discussions with the Green Bank to do that. Part of that was going to require some improvement to the school roofs. Now there's also going to be, as part of our project, the installation of the mechanical systems on the roofs, and the aspect of the project that was relating to the photovoltaic was being led by the school district really came to everybody's attention that it was really from an efficiency standpoint, because of the amount of work that was going to be done on the roofs as part of our project, that it be the roof project all be integrated and be handled as one from a standpoint of efficiency in terms of time and design and manpower and ultimately of cost. So again, I think it's a simple motion. We're not quite ready to recommend a number or ask for a specific appropriation, but I think it's a relatively simple motion to add the roof repair, roof expansion, the overall school roof project to the scope of the design that's being done by the design team.
I would add
Bill,
to that, that part of it is because where we need to locate some of the HVAC units is where we were planning to put the solar panels. So our project is beginning to run into this other project. And also, as I said earlier, our timelines were originally different. Now they're looking very similar. So that's part of the recommendation. The third piece I would add is that there is this money, while it looks like we're adding for a new appropriation, this is not additional spend, if you will. There was whether the Board of Ed did it or our committee did it, there was plan for this roof replacement already. This is not incremental work. Alan, is there anything you would add that Chris or I have missed or otherwise? Oops, we can't hear you, Alan. No. No. Shoot. And we need that function where you can type.
Right, the chat function, yeah.
Have them call in.
There is a chat. There is a chat function.
There is?
Mm-hmm. There's a chat function. Alan, Dr. Adley, if you go to the top right, there's a box that looks like a little message. There's a chat function. If you can type in. Yep.
Sarah, can you read it so that we have it?
I will. Yeah. As soon as I see it.
Anybody who watches it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you. Hope you type fast, Alan.
No pressure.
With bated breath, yes.
No pressure.
And Jill, while we're waiting, Jill, a recommended motion would be the HHR BC Building Committee recommends adding the Board of Education school roof project to the HHR BC project scope. Does that make sense?
That works for me.
Okay.
Yep.
Jill, this is David. While we're finishing up, so we are separating the potential financing of the roof projects from the recommendation to add them to our scope, right? And we will ascertain exactly how they get paid for
Yes.
at some subsequent.
Yes.
Yeah, how much? Yeah,
part-
how much? Yeah, go ahead, Jill. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought that's what we were doing. I just want to be sure.
Yes.
Got it.
In part because there is already an appropriation for a portion of Royal of 770,000. So we need to talk to Kate and Monica to understand exactly how it works technically, and then we also need to understand what we would really need to ask for. Thank you for the question, Dave.
I have Dr. Adley's remarks. Dr. Adler has said it makes all the sense in the world to do these roofs simultaneously as the part of the projects, as it is nonsense to coming back to do the new roofs after a year or two of the new project completion.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, he agrees.
So that sounds like no objection from Dr. Adley.
In fact, I think it's an endorsement.
So Sarah, can you reread that motion and we can get
Yep.
seconds, see if we can get seconds and votes?
Yep. The motion I'd like to make is that the HHRBC Building Committee recommends adding the Board of Education school roof project to the HHRBC project scope.
Can I get a second for that motion? All in
Yeah.
favor? Frank and
Actually,
David second.
Before you call the vote, Chris, just for the checking the boxes, Dave Cravenzola, Eric, and team also both agree that this was important to do. So if we could just, again, just so that
Note that for the record. Yeah.
I will. Hang on one second. So I'm sorry. Can you say it again? Was just writing the.
Maybe they each want to say it.
Well, yeah. Our feeling is to put roofs on a separate project, and then to within a year or so put holes in those new roofs to put things in, under, and around them just does not make any sense.
Also, that new equipment that's planned to go onto the roof are 20 plus year pieces of equipment, and those roofs are currently 16 to 18 years old, and so they will need replacing well in advance of the replacement of the stuff that's going on top. So we recommend it as well.
I think it makes all the sense in the world to do this from a construction perspective. So,
yes, Monica.
Jill, I have one question. It was mentioned earlier that there are sections on Royal and on Henley and Holmes that are relatively new. Are they being replaced as well?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Those are in good condition. They're only 2 years old.
Thank you. Good answer.
So can we get a vote on the motion as read by Sarah? All in favor? Great. Unanimous.
Thank you, guys.
Um,
Okay, and then how do we want to do the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, Sarah, tell me if we're allowed to do this. Can we put 7 on hold for a second and take care of what I think are housekeeping matters of 8 and 9? Because 7 is going to require a little bit more discussion and people may be getting a little fatigued.
I actually think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but do the remaining members need to be on for number 8 and 9? Because if we do 7, then maybe
we have votes there, Sarah. We have to vote to approve.
Yeah, we have to vote on we have to vote on 8 and 9 because there are some additional.
Right. My point is,
work.
do the additional members that are on this call need to be present for 8 and 9? Can we have the discussion to allow them to go, and then our committee can vote on 8
because I
and 9,
think,
or no?
well,
That's what I'm
yes,
asking.
some of them, yes, because I think
Just asking.
KG&D is in the best position to explain, or Burley and Gallagher is in the best position to explain the fire sprinkler hydraulic calculations, and Ty and Bond or KG&D is in the best position to explain why we think we need the additional survey work done by Redness and Mead.
Okay.
I mean, the letters are sort of self-explanatory, but I think it would be helpful to have the experts
Sure, I
explain to
think,
the people who have to vote on it.
sure. The only issue is that it is my understanding, and Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, that we cannot change an agenda at a special
Fine,
meeting.
then let's just go in order. Let's not
Okay.
spend any more time
Okay.
discussing what we can and can't do.
Okay.
So Jill,
Eric, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to punt it to Eric. I wanted you to just talk for a second, Eric, about, again, what would be easiest from your perspective and what you would recommend, and then we'll come up with a motion and take the vote.
Well, based on the discussion this evening, I think that you should make a motion that you're approving the schematic design, but reserving the right to make modifications to the mechanical design based on an upcoming meeting and discussion.
Okay. Perfect.
Can you repeat that, Eric? Because I really like the way that sounded.
Oh,
Reserving
no,
the
I
right
can't.
to. No, reserving the right to.
Oh boy.
It's
Make
recorded.
future modifications.
Yeah, reserving the right to modify the schematic design as it relates to the mechanical design
Based on an
the
upcoming
results
meeting.
of an upcoming meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Sarah, do you have that so that we can second it and
The
vote on it?
HHRBC Building Committee recommends approving the schematic design, reserving the right to modify the schematic design as it relates to mechanical engineering design based on the results of an upcoming meeting.
Can we get a second on that motion? We get a vote on that motion.
Okay,
All in favor?
did you second
Oh,
that?
sorry,
Thank
Jill
you.
Jill seconded.
Thank you, I appreciate
All in
it.
favor, everyone voted yes,
Okay,
as written.
Frank, yes?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. So the next item is discussing and possibly acting to approve proposed additional site survey work by Redness and Mead to identify storm and sanitary lines. Travis, who's best to take that to just do a quick explanation? I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. The letter from Redness is pretty self-explanatory, but why we think we need to do this.
Yep. The existing survey didn't include the inverts for the existing stormwater systems and the pipes and the manholes, the catch basins, etc. So Joe needs, our engineers, both Joe and BJ need those numbers so they know where the heights are for these pieces of equipment so they can know how they can attach to this and design their system. I mean, Joe, jump in.
Yeah, and the proposal by Redness has a dollar amount per school. I don't have that open in front of me, but it's not big dollars. It's like $2,000 per school.
Right.
Like a couple
Something like
$2,000 per school.
Yeah.
Any questions on that from the committee? With that, I'd make a motion to approve retaining Redness and Mead pursuant to their proposal. Sarah dated, I don't have it in front of me, pursuant to their proposal to do additional site survey work to identify storm and sanitary lines. I get a second on that. Jill seconds. All in favor? Unanimous. The next one, Travis, I think I'll kick this one to you as well, which is having Fire Protection Design Inc. do more precise fire sprinkler hydraulic calculations.
Yeah, I'm going to let Paul jump in there and discuss this one. Yep.
Sure. We had fire hydrant flow test done, which is typical when you're designing a sprinkler system. And then we discussed it with the fire marshal and Darien. And we feel that there's a moderate factor of safety here to add the sprinklers that we're adding. Also, we're not contributing to the hydraulically most remote situation. We're closer to where the main comes in, and I won't get into that, but we're recommending it because if you get a contractor that comes in who's going to do their own hydraulic calculations, it's possible that they can, if you get a wise guy, he can come back and say, we're going to need a fire pump and a emergency generator at each building. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So really, as an insurance policy, if we get this detailed hydraulic calculations done, and it's about $2,000 a building, I think one is 1,800, one's 2,000, around that area. It's like an insurance policy that we have our own calculations in our pocket to say, no, we don't need it.
Okay.
And I will point out that when sprinklers were added to these buildings, all the design drawings showed generators and fire pumps, and they weren't put in, which means that a contractor came and said, no, we don't need them. I did my hydraulic calculations and we don't need them. So I think it's just an insurance policy. It's just to make sure that we have our own ammunition in the future if the contractor that gets on board says that we need to add all this additional equipment, which in our opinion, we don't need.
And just so the committee has background, our design engineers, BGA, they do kind of a basis of design for their documents, but it still is a delegated design that is performed by the subcontractors. So that is why, like, they'll use our design as a framework, but they have to come back with their own engineer and they might have their own system. So if we do some of that work now up front by using essentially one of these subs, it'll help inform that process later on.
So then I guess I'd like to make a motion to approve retaining Fire Protection Design, Inc. pursuant to their written proposal to do the sprinkler hydraulic calculations. Can I get a second? Jill seconds. All in favor? Aye, unanimous. The next item is additional conclusions from the project cost estimating. I don't know that there's a heck of a lot more to say there. We spent a lot of time on it. Eric, did you have anything that you wanted to bring up in that regard?
No, only Dave and I have had a kind of several conversations on this, and we're just pleased that we're in the position that we're in a very inflationary period of time in the construction industry. To have two estimators look at this project with the full scope of work and say that we can accommodate that full scope of work within the budget that we have, I think is a good story. That's it. And obviously this is that in the schematic design, so we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be careful as we proceed forward. But where we are in the process, we're in a good place. Thank you.
Dave mentioned at some point the next cost estimating milestone. When is that? A fulsome cost estimate like the one we just went through. When will that next be done?
It will be done in December, and so probably just before the holiday season, we will have the same discussion.
Okay.
The one thing I think that came up, Eric, that was probably not exactly inside of the cost estimate, but was in parallel to it, was how we've budgeted for FF&E, correct? So that is a number that we need to be watching, if I'm not mistaken.
So this next phase is usually when we get into the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment line items, and we will be putting together a list of the furniture required for the new spaces. We're not addressing right now won't be addressing the existing spaces, but we will be addressing the new spaces, and we'll put a budget to that. If you decide that ultimately you want to look at a larger scope of work or a smaller scope of work, we can do it at that time. But when we looked at the $75,000 per building that was budgeted prior to our involvement, just through our experience in school design, we feel that that's somewhat light.
So it's important for the committee to know we'll have to keep a close eye on that. That somewhat might not be so somewhat.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to put a number to it tonight, but
No, we have.
And obviously it's part of an overall project. And so, you know, when we're looking at this, we're looking at holistically. So every single line item and a cost estimate is wrong, but the totality is right. And so you kind of have to look at it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
So the next item was upcoming dates, and I think Travis gave us kind of chapter and verse on the upcoming dates. The next big one, obviously, that we talked about is this coming Tuesday evening with the Board of Education. And then a week after that, there are meetings with both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. But again, the key one coming up next is the Board of Education. Anything else that anybody wants to add before we move to adjourn?
There is our next scheduled meeting next Thursday. Yeah. So we'll need to evaluate whether or not we may want to.
We can.
Dave, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, we can evaluate that. They're all right now considered special meetings because we're moving them around right now. It's fine. It's totally fine. We were gonna have it virtual anyway. We can make it a different virtual night.
Okay.
I think
so,
it's
but for the
important to
moment
get these
it's here
proposals.
because we may need it. Mm-hmm.
And Chris, we're going to try
Yeah.
to pin down. We're going to try to pin down the reconciliation, the cost estimate for the Curtis property prior to the 18th. And do we think?
I mean, ideally.
And do we think we'll be able to pin down how we're paying for the roof addition as well by then?
Well, I guess the how we're paying for it, pardon me for being confused. I don't know that, I think my understanding is we use it, working with the folks on this Zoom, figure out the how much, but the how it's going to be paid for is more of a school district, Board of Finance discussion. Jill,
Yes, we will. We'll clarify whether or not we need to ask for an appropriation or whether or not it can be handled by a transfer because there's an existing account. That's a question we will ask offline, and then we will come back to the committee with whether or not we need to go for an appropriation plus how much it would be if we do.
How much would be? Yeah, perfect. I just want to make sure we had all that set up, for the approval at the Board of Finance on the 18th. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So hopefully we'll be in close touch on that, Dave.
Dr. Adley, did you have something to say? You're gonna have to type it.
Or do you have something to type?
I feel like we need to get him a chalkboard or like a marker.
No, he's.
Or someone on the committee needs to be really good at reading lips.
No. Okay.
We love
He'll
you,
tell
Dr.
us
Adley.
later.
It's all good.
Sorry to joke at your expense, Dr. Adley.
Anything else?
No, so to confirm, the next meeting that was set for October 12th may possibly be moved due to approvals and the next steps for discussion. So we will get in touch with the committee.
For the moment, let's assume that it's happening, though.
Yep.
Because we have enough to discuss.
Yep.
Eric and Travis and Dave, do you think that you'd be any closer? I know we want to do a little bit of refining on the numbers, trying to come up with the right. Is that some work we could be doing over the next week with you guys?
Are you talking about as far as reconciling the Curtis property number?
Right. Yeah, reconciling Curtis and maybe getting some more detail on the roofs.
Yeah, I think that between our two estimators have started communication, so we can reopen that communication among that group and get them working on it. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Anything else?
Just one thing that on our list, I did reach out to Angela at the state and just asked for availability for the last week of October to do our SDR meeting, and that's the meeting that has to happen at the end of schematic design, once we have approvals from building committee and board of ed, and it's essentially the next step in that grant process. So we had talked about that when we met with them last week, and I just wanted to keep that ball moving with them. So we'll be in touch with some.
Yeah. Well,
dates
she
for
was
the-
also asking. Yeah, she was also asking about the roof project, and I guess we can figure out how we're gonna, if we're gonna need to amend our grant application to reflect
Yeah, actually,
that.
and I think Chris, that's a great point. I think a great thing to take out of that is going to be getting some feedback from them on what's the most efficient way for the town to get those grant applications updated. Certainly, if possible, before the deadline where they actually issue the priority list for the projects.
So
showing
who's
the
best to? Is that in your guys' court, Dave?
We'll collectively, the group of us that met with Andrea and
Kermit.
thank you, last week, we'll reconvene everyone again, and we'll have that conversation as a group, just like we did last week. So yeah.
But before we have the SDR meeting, we do need to get all that paperwork in. I think they require, right?
Well, yeah, I mean the
Yeah.
checklist has to be
Yeah.
done exactly, which is
Yeah.
why I know we've already started working on the uniformat estimate and stuff, but we got to compile it. But that's why I told her just get us availability for at least 2.5 to 3 weeks out, so we have some time.
Okay.
Great. Then could we get a motion to adjourn at 8:59? Jill seconds. All in favor? Aye. It was great spending time with you guys. And we'll see you all again soon, no doubt.
And then
Have a good night.
Eric and Paul, just as you're setting up the MEP meeting, just let me know too. I would like to have our MEP coordinators at that like they were.
I'll copy you on
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should do that sooner rather than later.
I just sent out an email with my availability to the whole group, I think. So hopefully
I'll resend that email, Frank, and just narrow it down to the MEP subcommittee.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I don't know everybody's
No problem.
names. So.